Hi everyone, my name is Natalie. Today I'm going to do my October reading wrap up. So all of the books that I read in October bar one, I have written reviews for, so I will link all of those things below in case you want to know more of my thoughts or more of my cohesive gathered thoughts. I'm just going to sort of talk at you in this video. Let's start talking about the non-fiction books. So first we have The Human Cosmos, A Secret History of the Stars by Joe Marchand. I've talked about this before. It is a review copy, as the other two nonfiction books are as well. This is a sort of a mix of anthropological, cultural, scientific exploration of humans' relationship with the cosmos. How has stargazing informed human life? So it's sort of looking at various aspects of human life, in that it starts with talking about fate and faith, so religion and belief systems, and related to our ideas and understanding of the planets, the solar system, the universe, Earth's relation to other planets, that kind of thing. It moves into talking about how, for example, ideas about the cosmos have been used in more sort of symbolic ways in regard to leadership. For example, it talks about some things related to the scientific side of things and discovery, such as navigation by stars. Because it touches on so many different sort of topics or disciplines, it meant that some chapters I enjoyed more than others, but I found there was so much food for thought in this, especially things that you might take for granted related to things such as the time management, especially, and the concept of time. If you have more of a general interest in space from a historical lens, then you will probably find something worthwhile in this. The second one is a book that I very recently talked about in my rainy day recommendations, and that is Wintering by Stephen Rutt, A Season with Geese. So this is a nature memoir where Stephen Rutt basically takes the starting point of observing geese through the winter season. So nature memoirs is, there's tons of them out there, and many of them are really enjoyable for what they are. This is a really good example of the kind of nature memoirs that I tend to enjoy, where the author starts off with talking about nature, actually observes the nature around him and sort of chronicles that, the changes of the seasons, the way that changes the landscape around him, how the colors are changing, how the temperature is lowering, how the animal behavior adapts over the course of the time movement and the seasonal transformation. But also he shares the thoughts he has himself and the feelings he has, that is sort of mirror to what is happening outside of his own body. And I think that is that tends to be the thing that I like in nature writing of this kind, where there's a mix of the observational and sort of outward look with the interior exploration of emotion connected to with nature. So he talks, for example, about especially how the seasons affect him. There was things in this that I found very personally relatable, and it's sort of a very quiet and sort of comforting read for me. The sort of observations he does is something that has a sense of inclusivity to it, I think. Although parts of this book he actually does travel a bit to see particular geese, most of it is about sort of admiring and appreciating the kind of nature you have already on your doorstep. And then the last nonfiction of these books that I have to talk about is The Secret Life of Fungi, Discoveries from a Hidden World by Eliot Whiteley. This book is sort of a hodgepodge of facts and interesting observations on fungi life. The book is divided into 3 sections. The first is Erupt, then Spread, and the third is Decay, and the latter section was by far my favorite. All of the sections touch on important aspects such as the use of fungi in in trying to create new and more sustainable materials. She talks about how they work in partnership with various organisms, how they sometimes work as parasites, but the latter section especially touches on sort of the duality of fungi, the fear we have of them, or a lot of us have of them, and the fascination that we feel, or the attraction that we feel towards them. The parasitic lifestyle being very opportunistic and not necessarily good for humans, and for not necessarily for other animals either. Or even for plants, really, because one of the things she mentions is the elm disease of the elm trees that was caused by fungi. On the other side of the poison things, we have the amazing qualities that fungi have, and some of the ways that they support other creatures, such as working as a network for trees underneath the ground, being vitally important for life, or the fact that they are proving to be so important in the dealing of waste that humans have caused, and that we have to deal with in some way. And fungi seem to be able to prosper in areas and in environments that nothing else would. I read one contemporary fiction book this month, and that was Transcendent Kingdom by Jassi. This is a book about a PhD student struggling with some family drama, or not necessarily drama, but family troubles. Her parents moved from Ghana when her brother was a young boy, and they moved to the US and had her a few years later. And the father eventually decides to go back to Ghana and leaves both the mother and the kids on their own. In particular, of course, we have the protagonist, Gifty. She is a student of neuroscience, specifically studying reward-seeking behavior in mice. And she is interested in this area of neuroscience specifically because of her brother's drug addiction. In sort of the contemporary moment of the book, she is working hard to do her PhD research, and her mother comes to visit her for the first time in a while, and her mother has sort of had a mental breakdown. She is barely eating or leaving the bed at all, and Gifty has a lot of sort of undealt with trauma and burdens that is starting to come to the surface because of the way that her mother is behaving and is feeling. So it's sort of the mother's troubles on the one hand, Gifty's troubles on the other, and then we get constant flashbacks into the family's past, to when the parents separate, what kind of effect it had on the kids, Gifty and her brother, and her brother's move into drug abuse as well. I think the one thing I would say is that this book is very interior. It's you're completely stuck in Gifty's head, which means that everything that feels important is what she finds important, and thus sometimes you have sort of this distance from the other characters that makes them seem less real. They seem very remote, and the only character that really feels real is Gifty herself. But because she is also very unwilling to face her emotions, a lot of the time the book as a whole feels kind of cold. Instead of being a deep dive into someone's heart, it's more a deep dive into their mind and into sort of an intellectual look at how Gifty is approaching her own life, how she's approaching her research, and how her research is influenced by her life in turn. So I think I found that what I actually did enjoy most was the sort of the conversations and the questions that came up in relation to her work, and in relation to race and religion and science, and those overlaps, especially the religion and science, and how she sometimes struggled to make sense of how they could work together, how she could sort of make peace with her mother's strong religion and her own interest in science. Then we have my Victober reading. I finished 2 Victorian books or almost, and read a few others as well that I'll get to in a minute, but I'll start off with the books that I actually finished. So first we have Two in a Tower by Thomas Hardy. This I did with Kate Howe as a read-along throughout the month of October. It was a stitch and listen thing where we listened to Two in a Tower as an audiobook. We had a group of people discussing this over the month, and it was a lot of fun. I had initially planned to do embroidery while I listened to this audiobook, but I switched over to a knitting project instead because I find knitting is much easier for me to relax with. I thought that I would show you briefly, see if I can actually make it show. I'm not sure if you can tell much. This is a sweater. It's the Wayne pullover by Sari Nordlund. Two in a Tower is a star-crossed lovers story. It's following an older woman who is married, and she meets this boy who I think he's like in his 20s or something. He's really interested in astronomy. He does stargazing basically all of his waking hours. He is sort of introducing her to his work and shares his passion for stargazing and talks about his dreams and things like that. They become friends, and soon that friendship turns into something more. So the premise of this one is sort of the star-crossed lovers on the one hand is obviously a central aspect to the entire book. The other side of it is the science theme that is running throughout, and you can see that there's a few sort of ideas of astronomy of the Victorian era sort of weaved into this book that I found so fun to read, especially because of course I was reading the Human Cosmos in the beginning of the month alongside of this one. The romance itself was interesting because of course there's a few things that sort of stood out. First of all, we have a female character that is actually quite she has agency, she makes a lot of her own decisions, she moves fairly freely in the beginning, and she's more experienced than him in certain ways. She's married, so there's some things related to the relationship that is a bit scandalous. The boy is, of course, he's younger than her, he's sort of naive and innocent in comparison to her, which I found very refreshing and different from what I've read of Victorian literature thus far. The relationship itself was also really cute, although I felt like the imbalance in their feelings was pretty much ongoing throughout the book, even though he supposedly had the same feelings for her, but I didn't really believe it. I think there was always an unevenness in the relationship. So I just really enjoyed the dramatic tendencies of Hardy in this book. I thought the writing was beautiful. The ending was ridiculous on an entirely its own level. I didn't think that the book as a whole was perfect. It had some flaws that, especially for me, I think it ended up feeling like there was a moral to the story, especially that the woman shouldn't have been wanting a younger man. That was the takeaway I had with this book. So I'm not loving the message of the book, or at least the thing that I found was the message. But I think I enjoyed the reading experience so much that I'm still definitely interested in reading more Hardy. The other one that I finished in the month was it's not technically a Victorian book, but it's by a Victorian author, and that is you seeing this one again. It is for the last time. I finished Valley of Fear, which was published I think in 1915 if I remember correctly. So obviously it's slightly after the Victorian era ended. But of course Arthur Conan Doyle is a classic Victorian author, so I think it counts. The Valley of Fear was the only one of the novels of the Sherlock Holmes series that I hadn't read before. It starts with this mystery in a mansion where a man has been killed. Sherlock and Watson go to investigate. It's connected to Moriarty, and he is introduced in this book as sort of a shadowy figure, which I thought was really fun to see, that the hints of Moriarty's power and how far he reaches without actually being present or visible directly in this book. The Valley of Fear, much like A Study in Scarlet, has a complete shift in the narrative about halfway through, where you get the backstory to the characters involved, and there's some repeat of some of the sort of ingredients of A Study in Scarlet as well, such as secret societies and sort of religious organizations, that kind of thing, violence within that organization, and an American setting. It was a very strange shift, much like A Study in Scarlet, but I did actually enjoy the story itself. So finally, I have finished all of the Sherlock Holmes novels, and my reread through the first three, and my first read through of The Valley of Fear. Next, I will be getting on to all of the short stories, so that will probably take me a few months as well. Now, on to the books that I've not finished for Victober, but that I'm still currently reading. So first of all, we have the gigantic book, and that is Middlemarch by George Eliot. I am now, I think, only fourth, maybe? I'm this way, this way into the book. Basically a portrait of a village with a lot of people involved, but so far we're introduced to two sisters. One of them is Dorothea, and she decides to marry this older man who she thinks will be good for her, and she will be able to help him in his religious work. She's gonna be not that kind of girl that lives a frivolous lifestyle. No, she's gonna get things done. And then it turns out, of course, that marriage isn't really a happy one. That is sort of the point where I'm at in the story. Then we have other families, such as Fred and his sister, and Fred has a lot of debts that he is trying to deal with. It's not going well. He sort of gets entangled into rumors around him about him using his family connections to get out of debts, and it sort of comes back to haunt him. We have a new doctor in town that he has big ideas on the reforms he wants to do for Victorian medicine, and I think that is one of my favorite aspects of this book so far. I think in general what I find with this is that George Eliot is such a ironic author. She has this tongue-in-cheek, almost laughing at her characters and sort of poking at them and making fun of them on the page, and I just love it. I'm constantly either smiling or laughing when I'm reading this. I'm listening to this as an audiobook, and I'm expecting that I will be continuing to listen to this all through November and December, because it's a long book and I don't really want to rush it. I'm enjoying taking my time with this. Another book that I've read sections of but not finished, and probably won't finish for a long time to come, is William Moore's Selected Writings and Designs, edited by Asa Briggs. So this is a collection of different writings that Morris has done. So it's everything from essays to pamphlets. The ones that I've read so far, there's the letter in the beginning where he basically introduces his own life, which was interesting. William Morris, of course, was a designer, among other things. He was a poet, he was a designer, he was a thinker, I guess. But I think he's most well known for his beautiful wallpaper designs, and I mean, they are stunning, and that is also what I know him particularly for. This, for example, he's done a book cover design as well. So he is multi-talented, but as I said, he touches on many aspects of life, such as his own life and personal observations. Political activism is a central idea throughout the writings I've read so far. Another aspect that he comes back again and again to is art, of course, and because he's an artist, that doesn't really surprise me, but the the thing that I'm currently reading is Innate Socialism. This lecture was first published in pamphlet form with the title The Decorative Arts. It was Moore's first public lecture. So obviously you can tell there's very mixed pieces of text and in sort of different ways that they've been produced. But this one talks about the role of the decorative arts, basically all of the arts that have a practical function, such as wallpaper and other forms of interior design and crafts related things, and the beauty of those things in beautifying the world, beautifying our everyday lives, but also being something of value to the craftspeople themselves. I'm loving exploring that. I think this is one that I will be reading for a long time to come, because I don't think I will be reading it in one go. I'm just gonna continue on with the essay that I'm currently reading, which is a few pages. And then maybe set it aside and pick it up for a little bit later. Last up we have the Victorian Scientist that I am currently reading. So I made an entire video talking about Victorian female scientists that wrote books. I decided to pick up the book that I was most interested in as an ebook, Color in Nature, A Study in Biology by Marion Newbigin. And this one is, as the title suggests, about colors in nature, colors of plants, colors of animals, basically any color production in the world, in the natural world, and her studies of that. So I'm only in the beginnings of this, but I'm already loving it so much. She introduces this book. This little book is an attempt to set forth in systematic order the main facts at present known in regard to the pigments and colors of plants and animals. Although there are not a few books which treat of the external aspects of the colors of organisms, it is a frequent complaint among those engaged in actual research that not only is the physiological side of the subject inadequately treated in the textbooks, but the literature is also scattered and difficult of access. It is hoped that the present work may both help to supply this deficiency and also appeal to that wider public whose interest in the problem of color has been aroused by the existing general books on the subject. I love this topic anyway, and I'm loving the way that she writes about these things. It's very clear. As I said, I'm still very early into this book, but I thought I would mention it because I am actually reading one of the female scientists that I had mentioned that I wanted to read. So those are all the things I want to talk about in terms of my October reading. Let me know what you read in October. Also, something that I've forgot to mention in the last few videos, I am a Blackwell's affiliate. I actually became that, I think, in September. And I forgot to mention it every single time that I make a video. And I probably should have mentioned it in the beginning of the video, but oh well. Basically that means that if you use the link that I have provided below, I get a small commission for every purchase of books through that link, and that money will go directly into my book buying habits. So if that is something you're interested in, then that is the link is down below. And Blackwell's my favorite online bookstore, so that is the reason I wanted to do my affiliate link specifically with them. So yeah, that was all I wanted to say. Hope you have had a wonderful reading month in October. Hope you're excited for Nonfiction November, this starting today when you're watching this or when this is going up. So I hope you're doing well. Take care, and I'll talk to you soon.